Chapter 1. The alley air was a thick, cold soup of city grime and endless rain. Nicky Bells huddled deeper into her worn coat, clutching the slim, slightly damp portfolio against her chest. Every muscle in her body was tight with stress, a familiar, unwelcome tension that had been her constant companion since the layoff 3 months ago. Today was her lifeline, an interview at Sterling and Roth, a firm that could finally put her 3-year-old son, Leo, back in decent daycare and ensure Mr. Mason, her perpetually furious landlord, stopped leaving veiled threats on her voicemail. She was already 15 minutes late. She could not afford to pause. But then she turned the corner, and the man in the alley stopped her cold. He sat on the wet, filthy pavement, using a sodden piece of cardboard as a useless shield against the downpour. He was unshaven, his dark hair plastered to his forehead, and his clothes were tattered and soaked through. He was a portrait of total destitution, yet something in his bearing defied the misery of his circumstances. Nicky's heart gave that familiar, aching pang of sympathy. She knew what it was to be defeated by the cold, gray wash of a miserable morning. She knew what it felt like to have the world seep into your bones, but she had Leo to think of. She had to hurry. Except this man wasn't defeated. Most people in his situation, exposed to the torrential Seattle rain, would be hunched over, trying to make themselves smaller, invisible. This man sat as if the alley were his private study. His spine was ramrod straight, his broad shoulders squared with a dignity that was completely at odds with the wet pavement beneath him. He looked like a powerful man who had momentarily paused his reign for a strategic rest. When he finally looked up, meeting her eyes, Nicky's breath caught in her throat. His gaze was unsettling. It wasn't threatening, but it was intensely aware. His eyes were the most unusual shade of bright, glittering amber she had ever seen, the color of warmed honey and danger, too proud and sharp for someone who should have been broken by whatever circumstances had landed him here. The intensity of that look made her stumble. Her cheap, worn shoe caught on an uneven stone. The world tilted. Suddenly, she was falling forward. Her cherished portfolio flew from her grasp, the resumes scattering across the grimy pavement. The meager contents of her purse spilled everywhere. Her wallet with its precious dollars, the carefully wrapped sandwich that was supposed to be her only meal today, Leo's favorite plastic dinosaur, and a few crumpled pens. "No, not again," she whispered, scrambling on her hands and knees. Humiliation burned her cheeks, even though there was no one but the stranger to witness her clumsy disaster. She desperately tried to scoop up the dollar bills before the rain soaked them completely. That's when she saw the strange man's hands moving alongside hers. Nicky tensed, bracing herself. She expected him to pocket the cash. She honestly wouldn't have even blamed him if he did. She prepared to shout to snatch her wallet back. But instead, his large, rough hands gathered her scattered belongings with surprising care and precision. He picked up the sandwich, dusted off the single dollar bill, and even retrieved the small, green plastic dinosaur. He held everything out to her with a gentleness that took her completely off guard. "I believe these are yours, miss," he said. His voice was deep, resonant, and carried the unmistakable cadence of expensive schooling and authority, though it was softened by a current of fatigue. He didn't ask for thanks. He didn't reach for her hand or the money. He just settled back against the wall with that same inexplicable composure. "Thank you," Nicky managed, accepting her things with hands that trembled slightly, partly from the cold, mostly from shock. The money she held represented her bus fare home and the tiny buffer that would ensure Leo could have a proper dinner tonight. And yet, without allowing herself time to analyze the absolute stupidity of the gesture, she crumpled the meager bills, almost everything she had, and pressed them into his palm. "For you," she said softly, meeting his amber gaze. "Get yourself something warm to eat." The way he looked at her then made her chest tighten with an emotion she couldn't identify, a mix of surprise, appraisal, and a flash of something achingly human. It was as if she had just performed an extraordinary, selfless feat instead of simply giving him the last of her emergency fund. "Thank you," he said quietly, the money disappearing into his grasp. The dignity returned, sharp and unyielding. Nicky nodded, already turning to rush toward the major street, toward the interview she would now likely be 25 minutes late for, rushing toward what might have been her last chance at financial stability. But then she stopped. Her heart, which had been racing from the fall, now hammered with sharp, cold fear. She noticed a dark, slick stain spreading across the wet pavement where the man was sitting. It was too dark for alley grime. Blood. She stopped, turning back and staring closer. How had she missed it before? The man was composed, yes, but the rain and shadows had hidden the truth. His tattered jacket hung open slightly, revealing a dark, sodden patch along his ribs where fresh blood seeped through his torn shirt. "You're hurt," she exclaimed, fear cutting through her stress. The man glanced down at his side, almost as if surprised to find it bleeding. "It's nothing," he dismissed, his voice suddenly thinner. He's too pale, Nicky thought, her maternal instincts kicking in hard. His lips had taken on a bluish tinge that had nothing to do with the cold rain. "That is absolutely not nothing," she said firmly, tossing all thoughts of the interview aside. She could not leave an injured man bleeding out in the street, especially not one who had just shown her an unexpected kindness. "You need to get that looked at. That's a bad wound." She bit her lip. He obviously couldn't afford a doctor or hospital. That much was brutally clear from his circumstances. She thought of her son, the apartment, the rent, and the job that was now almost certainly lost. Then she looked at this mysterious man, dignified and bleeding in the pouring rain. "Come with me," she said, making a decision that defied all logic and self-preservation. She extended her hand again. "I can clean that wound and bandage it properly. I have a first aid kit at home." Something quick and dark flickered across his face, a momentary shadow of internal struggle. Yet he remained perfectly still, staring at her outstretched hand without responding. The silence stretched uncomfortably, broken only by the drum of the rain. "My name is Nicky, by the way. Nicole Bells," she tried, offering a gentle, encouraging smile. "What's yours?" He started, then stopped. His amber eyes met hers, and for the first time since she'd seen him, he looked truly, devastatingly lost. "I can't remember," he murmured. The rain continued to fall between them, as those three impossible words hung in the saturated air. Chapter 2. "You can't remember," Nicky repeated, staring at him in confusion. "What do you mean, you can't remember?" "My name, the last few days, weeks maybe," he whispered, his exhaustion suddenly visible. Nicky wanted to ask 1,000 questions. "Are you concussed? Who stabbed you? How did you lose your memory?" But something in his expression, lost and almost fragile, stopped her. Maybe it was shock from blood loss or trauma from the wound, but standing here interrogating an injured amnesiac man in the pouring rain wasn't helping anyone. "It's okay," she said gently, lowering her voice. "We can figure that out later." He looked at her extended hand for another long, assessing moment before slowly reaching out to take it. His fingers were large, surprisingly cold despite the earlier warmth she'd felt. She could see the immense effort it took for him to pull his large frame upright. He swayed slightly, leaning on her for balance, and the moment they connected, she felt the startling density of him, powerful, even when injured. "There's a pharmacy just around the corner," she said, leading him out of the alley. "I need to get proper supplies to clean that wound. Hydrogen peroxide and rubbing alcohol won't be enough for that." The pharmacist, Mrs. Sarah, a middle-aged woman with kind, worried eyes, immediately sprang into action as Nicky explained the situation, omitting the amnesia part. "Deep cut?" she asked, pulling items from the shelves with practiced speed. "You'll need antiseptic solution, gauze, medical tape, and these waterproof bandages. Very important to keep it dry once it's cleaned. Infection sets in fast with wounds like that." Nicky nodded, watching the growing pile of medical supplies with a sick feeling in her stomach. "What should we watch for?" "Redness spreading from the wound, red streaks, any unusual smell, fever." The pharmacist ticked off the symptoms. She rang up the total. "That'll be $43.50, dear." Nicky's stomach dropped. She counted the meager bills she had left. I'm so sorry, I don't have enough." Heat flooded her cheeks. I forgot my card at home. I only have this. Mrs. Sarah's expression softened with understanding. Oh, bless your heart. Trying to help someone when you're down to pennies. You keep that change, honey. Just take the antiseptic and the bandages. We can't have him getting an infection. She pushed a bottle of proper antiseptic and the waterproof bandages toward her. That'll be $12 flat, and you bring him back if it gets worse. Relief flooded through Nicky, so intense it was dizzying. Thank you, Mrs. Sarah. I really appreciate it. She handed over the $12. Back outside, the nameless man was leaning against the pharmacy wall, his face even paler than before. My apartment's only a few blocks away, she said, clutching the small pharmacy bag. I have everything else we need there, and it's warm and dry. He looked at her with those unsettling amber eyes, and she could see the internal struggle playing across his features. A natural instinct to retreat from help, perhaps. A wariness of revealing vulnerability. It's okay, she said, her voice firm. You're hurt and I'm offering help. That's what people do. I have a son, Leo, and you'll be safe there while I clean you up. Something in her tone, the simple, unwavering conviction, seemed to decide it for him. He nodded once, a sharp, grateful gesture. I will go by the name James, he said finally. I remember that name from somewhere. They began the long, slow walk home. As they moved, Nicky worried about Leo. Her sitter, a college student who lived on the first floor, was only supposed to keep him for the duration of the interview. Now she was hours late and bringing home a large, silent, injured stranger. Nicky's apartment building was a tired, 3-story structure that had seen better decades. It had peeling paint, a permanently sticky front door, and a general air of resigned despair. As they climbed the narrow, creaking staircase to the second floor, she was acutely aware of James behind her. The quiet, almost soundless way he moved, and how he seemed to take in every detail of their surroundings with those sharp amber eyes. It felt less like a lost man, and more like a predator cautiously surveying new territory. On the landing, they encountered Mr. Peters from 1B, standing in his pajamas and slippers, staring vaguely at the ceiling. Oh, hello, dear, he said to Nicky, blinking owlishly. I need to get milk for my coffee, but I can't remember where I put my keys. Nicky's heart sank. This was the 5th time this month she'd found the sweet, elderly man like this. Mr. Peters, you're not dressed. Let's get you back inside. I'm not. He looked genuinely surprised, pulling his cardigan tighter. James stepped forward. He gently took Mr. Peters's other arm, his large hands surprisingly deft as he guided the elderly man back toward his apartment door. He smells of sickness, James murmured, so quietly only Nicky could hear, his expression strained. What's that? She whispered back, confused. Nothing, he said, shaking his head slightly. Just an old building smell, never mind. Once they had settled Mr. Peters safely inside his apartment, Nicky led James down the hall to her own door. Her hands shook slightly as she fumbled with the keys. The full, terrifying reality of what she was doing hit her like a physical blow. Her apartment suddenly felt impossibly small. The stranger seemed to fill the entire hallway just by standing there, this tall, broad-shouldered man with a voice of velvet and the eyes of a professional gambler. What if he's dangerous? What if helping him was the stupidest thing I've ever done? What about Leo? James seemed to sense her sudden, crippling tension. He stopped just inside her doorway, keeping his distance, his hands visible and open at his sides. I can go, Nicky, he said quietly, his voice gentle, utterly unthreatening. The way he was giving her an immediate out made her feel a flood of protective guilt. A truly dangerous man wouldn't do that, would he? No, she said, shaking her head firmly. You're hurt and there's a storm coming. Wait right here. I just need to check on my son. She hurried into the small living room where Leo was happily playing with his sitter. She quickly explained the situation, making up another excuse for the interview, and paid the sitter double to stay an extra hour. Once Leo was safe and the sitter was settled, Nicky turned back to James. Before I look at that wound, she said, taking in his rain-soaked, dirty clothes that were leaving dark, wet spots on her hardwood floor. You need to clean up. If I bandage you like this, you'll definitely get an infection. And I need to get you out of those clothes before I have to replace my flooring." She disappeared into her small bedroom and returned with an armful of men's clothing. Clean jeans, a dark navy sweater, and socks. "These belong to my ex-husband," she explained, trying to keep her voice light and professional. "He left them here when he moved in with his new colleague. His loss is your gain, I guess." James took the clothes with a grateful, solemn nod. "Thank you." "Bathroom through there," she said, pointing. "There's shampoo, soap, and clean towels. I even have an unused razor and shaving cream if you want them." While he showered, Nicky busied herself sterilizing the medical instruments and cleaning up the scattered toys. She listened to the sound of running water and tried not to think about the fact that there was a naked, mysterious stranger, a man with amnesia and a dagger wound, in her bathroom. She tried calling Sterling and Roth to reschedule her interview, but the frosty receptionist barely let her finish explaining before hanging up. "Well, that's that job opportunity gone." 20 minutes later, the bathroom door opened with a soft click, and when Nicky turned around, her breath caught and lodged in her chest. Clean-shaven and fresh from the shower, James was stunning, breathtaking in a way that knocked the air from her lungs. The stubble had hidden nothing. Now his jawline was sharp, his cheekbones high, and his features were classical, perfectly formed like something out of a Renaissance statue. He looked like an aristocrat who had decided to slum it for a week. The plain, borrowed clothes suddenly looked tailored. She stared a moment too long, heat creeping up her neck. "Right," she said, her voice a little hoarse. "Let's get that cleaned up. Leo, honey, stay in your high chair for Mommy, okay?" The wound was worse than she thought. A deep, clean puncture, not a jagged tear, with considerable bruising around the edges. "This looks like a stab wound," she said, keeping her voice steady as she applied the antiseptic. He didn't flinch, only tensing slightly. "When did this happen?" she asked, blotting the blood with a clean cloth. "A couple of hours ago, I think," he replied, his voice tight with controlled pain. "Some men were displeased that I'd chosen their spot to wait out the rain. One had a knife." Nicky paused. "They stabbed you over a place to sit." "When territory is all you have," he said quietly, his amber eyes steady on hers. "You defend it no matter how small." The wound was finally clean. She applied antibiotic ointment, careful and slow. "You should really see a doctor," she insisted, carefully tapping the waterproof bandage into place. "I'm worried about blood loss." "This will have to do," he said simply. Outside, the storm swelled. James glanced at the window, then back at her. "Stay," she said firmly, smoothing down the last strip of tape. "At least until the storm passes. I have a couch that folds out." He studied her, his amber eyes unreadable, then nodded. "Just until the storm passes, Nicky," he agreed. As if on cue, thunder rolled overhead like a freight train, and the lights flickered, plunging the apartment into a momentary, tense darkness before the power kicked back on. Chapter 3. That night, Nicky lay awake in her small twin bed, listening to the storm rage outside. Every creak of the old building made her hyper-aware of the stranger sleeping on her fold-out couch. He might look like a fallen angel, clean and impossibly handsome, but that didn't erase the fact that he was an amnesiac who had been stabbed and had an air of latent danger about him. She had a child to protect. She must have eventually drifted off. The next morning, the storm was still battering the windows when Nicky emerged from her bedroom. "Good morning, Nicole," her guest said, turning to offer her a steaming mug. "I hope you don't mind, I made coffee." "No, that's great, James," she said, accepting the cup gratefully. "You didn't have to do that." She studied his face in the morning light. Clean-shaven and rested, he looked even more striking than he had the night before. There was something almost aristocratic about the way he held himself, even in her ex-husband's borrowed clothes. "Are you hungry?" she asked. "I could make breakfast. Leo will be waking up soon." As she moved around the tiny kitchen, pulling out eggs and a little bit of bacon she had saved for a special treat for Leo, she noticed him examining her small bookshelf. "The Brothers Karamazov," he said, touching the spine of the book, his voice tinged with a strange mix of recognition and longing. Nicky paused, spatula in hand. Have you read it? His brow furrowed in concentration. I think so. I remember enjoying it. The depth of the human soul, the conflict between faith and doubt. So, you do remember some things, Nicky observed carefully. The question seemed to pain him. Not really. Nothing beyond waking up alone in an alley about 2 months ago, he said, the words heavy with resignation. I don't know how I got there. No wallet, no identification. Maybe a head injury, Nicky suggested gently. I had no visible injuries when I woke up, he replied. Just emptiness. This is the first thing that feels a bit familiar to me. He looked back at the book. I remember particularly liking one of the characters, Dimitri. He was passionate, conflicted, but ultimately redeemable. Nicky's heart ached for the quiet desperation in his voice. Then that should be your name, James, she said impulsively. Because you sound like a good man, even if you can't remember it. James, he repeated slowly. Simple, strong, that's acceptable, I suppose. Nicky couldn't help but laugh at his prim, almost formal expression. The moment she laughed, James suddenly went rigid, his head snapping up as if he'd heard something impossible. What's wrong? Nicky asked, turning off the burner, ready to defend her son if necessary. He didn't answer, instead rising and moving to the center of the room. He sniffed the air, his nostrils flaring slightly, an action that looked unnervingly intense. Can't you smell that? He asked urgently, his amber eyes wide. Nicky inhaled deeply, trying to detect a fire or gas. Smell what? The bacon? I haven't even started it yet. No, he said, the urgency in his voice rising. Something's wrong. It's a bitter, metallic odor, faint but deadly, a very subtle sickness in the air. Before she could respond, he bolted for the door, moving with a speed that startled her. What the heck? Nicky muttered, following him into the hallway. She spotted him halfway down the stairs, trying to force open a door on the ground floor. It's locked, she called down to him. It leads to the boiler room. You need a key. James ignored her, throwing his broad shoulder against the door. The sound of wood splintering and metal protesting filled the stairwell. Stop, Nicky said, hurrying down the steps. You need a... The door gave way with a loud crack, and James disappeared inside the dark basement. Nicky stared at the broken door frame in shock. What are you doing? I'm going to get in trouble with Mr. Mason, she called, following him cautiously into the dark basement. The basement was a cramped, frightening space, filled with the building's ancient, rattling heating system. She could see James near the enormous boiler, examining something with intense focus. Seriously, you can't be here. She tried again, starting down the stairs. Stay back, he ordered, his voice sharper than she'd ever heard it. There's a leak. You can't stay in here. It's dangerous. What kind of leak? Gas? Carbon monoxide, James said, pulling her roughly toward the building's exit. It's been leaking slowly. The boiler is cracked. We need to call emergency services now. Okay, I have a phone upstairs. No, it's not safe. The air is thicker on the upper floors. He was already dragging her outside into the storm. Rain immediately soaked through their borrowed and worn clothes. He pulled her down the street. The nearest cafe was half a block away, but James seemed to know exactly where he was going, navigating the treacherous, flooded sidewalks with the confidence of someone who had studied the city's every corner. Emergency, he told the frantic barista gruffly, dripping water onto the floor. We need to use your phone now. 20 minutes later, Nicky watched from across the street as firefighters streamed into her building. The fire chief, a serious woman with a grim expression, confirmed a significant leak in the basement. The gas detection system was malfunctioning, and carbon monoxide has been seeping into the building for weeks, the fire chief told James, shaking her head. Don't know how you figured it out. Carbon monoxide has no smell. James looked like he was about to explain his hyper-awareness when Mr. Mason arrived, looking harried and deeply annoyed by the commotion. What's all this about? He demanded, glaring at Nicky. Did you cause this mess, Bells? "There's a gas leak, Mr. Mason," Nicky explained, her voice shaking with adrenaline. "It could have killed people, especially Mr. Peters." "The ventilation system just needs a good kick," Mr. Mason muttered, then caught himself. "I mean, you're all overreacting." James stepped forward. The dignity in his posture sharpened into something cold and formidable. "You knew." His voice was low, precise, carrying a weight of threat that had nothing to do with volume. "You knew there was a problem with the ventilation, and you did nothing." Mr. Mason took a step back, blinking nervously at the large, pale stranger. "Now see here. You have a responsibility to maintain safe living conditions," James continued, his tone sharp, his voice carrying an icy authority. "The lack of proper gas detection and ventilation maintenance is a clear violation of city codes. People could have died." "Mr. Peters has been getting confused and sick," Nicky interrupted, the pieces clicking together with sickening clarity. "That's why he's been so disoriented. He's been slowly poisoning himself." Mr. Mason's face went pale, realizing the seriousness of the situation. "Look, nobody needs to make this into a big deal. I'll fix it, I promise." "You're going to be hearing from my attorneys," James said flatly, his amber eyes blazing with an unholy light. "Negligent endangerment, criminal violation of housing codes. The moment my team finds you, you'll be buried in paperwork." "Wait," Mr. Mason said desperately. "Maybe we can work something out, Nicky. How about 3 free months rent for everyone? I'll sign a waiver." "You're joking," James cut him off, his voice flat with dismissal. "You endangered lives through criminal negligence for the sake of a cheap fix." "James," Nicky said quietly, placing a gentle, anchoring hand on his arm. She could feel the powerful tension radiating from him, but he allowed her to pull him aside. "Look," she whispered in a low voice, "I appreciate what you're doing, but nobody here can afford lawyers. Certainly not you. We're all barely making it." James's mouth opened like he was about to protest. Then it closed and he blinked, like he was only just remembering the reality of his current state, homeless, penniless, and relying on her. "That's not the point," he said eventually, his voice softer. "He can't be allowed to get away with this, not when lives were at stake." "He's not getting away with it," Nicky said firmly. "He's offering 3 months free rent for everyone. That's real help right now. Everyone is safe thanks to you. That's what matters." She watched him wrestle with this, saw the moment when his rigid posture started to relax slightly. The hard edges of his authority softened, and he looked almost vulnerable again. "Who are you really, James?" Nicky wondered, watching him stare pensively out at the storm, the man who could go from regal street sleeper to sharp-tongued lawyer in a matter of moments. Chapter 4. Later that evening, when the fire department finally gave the all-clear and the building was deemed safe for habitation, Nicky and James climbed the stairs to her apartment in a tired but companionable silence. Leo was fast asleep, exhausted from the excitement. "Let me check your wound," Nicky said once they were inside. James nodded, settling onto the couch and lifting the borrowed sweater. Nicky knelt beside him, her fingers working to carefully peel back the bandage. The wound was still there, but where she expected a heavily inflamed, weeping cut, she found the edges were clean, tightly pulled, and already beginning to scab over with a fierce, unhealthy resilience. The bruising had faded from purple to a mottled yellow-green. It's closing incredibly fast," she whispered, her voice laced with disbelief. "I've never seen a puncture wound heal this quickly, even with the best care." James stared down at his own torso with the same bewilderment she felt. "I remember the pain. It was deep. I should be feverish." Nicky ran her finger lightly over the spot where the wound had been. "You have a strength to you, James, a physical resilience. Maybe it's just that sheer willpower of yours." "Maybe," James agreed, but his voice lacked conviction. The confusion soon faded, replaced by something much warmer. As the silence stretched between them, Nicky became acutely aware of how close they were. How she was still kneeling beside him on the couch, her hand resting against his bare chest, feeling the steady, powerful rhythm of his heartbeat. Her breath caught when he lifted his hand, his large, rough fingers hovering just above her cheek. Then reality crashed back in, sharp and final. "I should go," James said, his voice husky with sudden tension. He pulled his sweater back down, standing abruptly and moving away. "Go," she repeated the word a soft plea. "I'm better," he said, his back to her. "You've been more than kind, but I should give you your space back. And your life. You have a little boy, Nicky. I can't be this complication. I don't know who I am, and I might be a very bad man." Nicky felt a strange, powerful urge to protest, to find reasons why he should stay. She could claim the need to monitor the wound, the broken boiler room door. But none of them made sense. He was right. He was recovering, and she had no real reason to ask him to stay. "Of course," she said instead, forcing a brittle smile that felt ready to shatter. "Let me pack you some food, and take this umbrella." When she returned to the living room, James was folding his old, tattered clothes that had dried by the radiator. "Keep those," she said, nodding toward the clothes he was wearing. "They fit you better anyway, and they're dry." "Are you sure?" "Trust me, I never want to see those clothes again," she said, the bitterness about her ex-husband surprising them both. James took the bag of food, his fingers brushing hers as he did. The contact sent a jarring shock through her, electric and immediate. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For everything, your kindness, your home, your care. I don't know how to repay you." "It was nothing," Nicky assured him, leaning into the lie. "No," James told her, his amber eyes blazing with conviction. "It wasn't nothing. You helped a stranger when you had every reason not to. You shared your food, your safety. I don't remember who I was before, but I don't think I was kind. I don't think I would have done what you did, Nicky." And then he was gone, leaving her standing in her suddenly too quiet apartment, staring at the empty couch where he'd slept and the tiny, green plastic dinosaur he'd carefully retrieved. Chapter 5. 2 days passed in a blur of ordinary routine that somehow felt completely wrong. Nicky went to meaningless job interviews, came home to her empty, small apartment, and tried to pretend she didn't keep glancing at the couch where James had slept. She told herself it was ridiculous. She knew him for less than 48 hours. People don't form profound, life-altering attachments that quickly to complete strangers. She had Leo. She had to focus on Leo. But then the storm hit. It started as heavy, relentless rain around noon, the kind that made the city's inadequate drainage systems overflow and turn the side streets into flowing rivers. By evening, it had upgraded to something apocalyptic. Howling winds that rattled her windows, hail the size of golf balls, and rain so heavy she could barely see the building across the street. Nicky paced her apartment, checking the weather reports obsessively. All she could think about was James somewhere out there in this nightmare, whether with nothing but the clothes on his back and a meager bag of food. By 10:00 p.m., she couldn't stand it anymore. "Mommy's just going outside for a minute, sweetie," she whispered to the sleeping Leo. She pulled on her heaviest coat, grabbed her one functional umbrella, and ventured out into the storm. The wind nearly knocked her over the moment she stepped outside. The streets were almost completely deserted, except for the occasional emergency vehicle racing past with sirens wailing. Water rushed down the gutters like rapids, and she had to hold onto building walls to keep from being swept away. She made it to the alley where she first found him. Empty, except for debris blown in by the wind. Where would he go? Where could anyone go in this? She was about to give up, soaked to the bone and shivering violently, when she spotted a figure huddled in a narrow alcove between two abandoned buildings, sheltered slightly from the worst of the wind. "James," she called out, fighting to be heard over the noise of the wind and rain. He looked up, and even through the rain, she could see the surprise in his intense amber eyes. "Nicky." They shared a look across the storm-lashed space between them, a look that conveyed more than a week's worth of conversation. "You're still here," she said, gesturing vaguely to the area near where she'd first found him. A small, genuine smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Well, I thought, just in case." The way he said it made her chest tight. Just in case of what? In case she came looking for him. The possibility that he might have been hopping she would flooded her with warmth despite the cold rain. "Come back with me," she said impulsively. "Please, you can't stay out here in this weather, it's too dangerous." "Nicky, what if those men come back? You have your son to think of," he countered. She interrupted him with a weak joke. "What if I need someone with an uncanny sense of danger to protect the building? Or someone who can miraculously heal overnight to help me move furniture?" Sense of danger. James looked like he was fighting another smile. A particularly strong gust of wind sent debris flying past them. His hand came up to steady her, fingers gentle but firm on her arm, the power radiating through his touch. "The storm's getting worse," she said quietly. "I won't be able to sleep knowing you're out here. I'm a terrible mother if I can't sleep." He looked at her for a long moment, rain dripping from his dark hair, the depth of his amber gaze searching her face. "You don't even know me, Nicky." "That's not true," she protested, the admission feeling heavier than it should. You're my friend. The man I know is a hero who saved my neighbors. The man I know gave me back my wallet when he was starving." "Come home with me, James," she said softly, "just until the storm passes." He nodded finally, and she felt relief flood through her so strongly it was almost dizzying. "Just until the storm passes," he agreed. Chapter 6. Back in her apartment, they stood dripping in her small entryway. The sound of the wind outside was a hungry howl. "I should get you a towel," Nicky said, acutely aware of how his wet clothes clung to his tall, powerful frame. "That would be good, Nicole," James agreed, his voice low. She bustled around, gathering dry clothes and towels, trying to ignore the way her pulse quickened every time she came near him. You can change," she said, gesturing toward the bedroom. "I'll go sleep on the couch. You should too. It's late and you're still recovering from that cut." "Nonsense. You take the bed, I'll take the couch," he insisted. "No, I made you leave last time. I'll take the couch, it's my couch." They stood there in her small living room, the weight of unspoken things pressing down on them, the tension a tangible third presence in the room. "Well," Nicky said finally, "good night, James." She escaped to the fold-out couch, but sleep was impossible. Not with him only a few feet away, separated only by a paper-thin partition and a flimsy door. Every creak, every shift of the couch, every deep, measured breath he took sounded like it was right next to her. After what felt like an hour of tense, wide-eyed wakefulness, she gave up. Barefoot, she crept to the door and pressed her ear against it. Silence. She eased it open and peeked out. The living room was washed in cold, silvery moonlight filtering through the storm-lashed windows. James was sitting on the edge of the couch, elbows on his knees, staring intently out the window, still watchful, like he was casing the streets for a threat. "Can't sleep either," she whispered. He turned his head toward her voice. Even in the dark, his amber eyes seemed to gleam. "No," he said softly. She stepped out, suddenly too aware of her thin nightgown and bare legs. The air felt colder, her skin tighter. "I thought maybe I'd make some tea," she said, trying to sound casual. "Chamomile, it helps sometimes." "Help," he repeated, and there was something darkly amused, almost mocking in his tone. She cleared her throat. "Would you like some?" She was already reaching for the kettle when she heard him stand. Footsteps behind her, slow, controlled, and deeply present. And when she turned, he was there. She backed up instinctively, the counter pressing into her lower back. He followed, stopping just shy of touching her, the residual cold of the night air radiating from him. "Nicky," he murmured, his voice like smoke, rough and intimate. She wets her lips. "Yes." "I don't want tea," he murmured, his face coming closer. "No," she asked, her voice barely a breath. Her hands flew up to his chest, meant to push him away, but they didn't. They curled into the fabric of his sweater instead, pulling him closer, anchoring herself to his solid power. "You smell like rain and clean heat," he replied, his lips grazing her throat. And something sweeter underneath. "James," she breathed, her whole body thrumming with a primal, terrified excitement. "You've been so kind to me," he whispered. You saved my life, Nicky. Let me show my appreciation. The kiss crashed over them like the storm outside. Hungry, reckless, and overdue. He kissed her like he was remembering something with his body before his mind could catch up, like her mouth was a secret he'd known in another, darker life. He was dominant, yet tender, demanding and yielding all at once. It was a kiss that spoke of possession, of gratitude, and of a dangerous, magnetic attraction that defied common sense. And the tea was forgotten entirely. Chapter 7. Nicky woke to the low clink of ceramic and the soft hiss of a stovetop flame. She padded barefoot into the kitchen, the cotton of her nightgown clinging to sleep-warmed skin. James stood at the stove, making coffee, barefoot. When he turned to look at her, his amber eyes glowed in the morning light, and his slow, lazy smile nearly brought her to her knees. "Morning, Nicole," he rumbled, his voice still thick from sleep. "Morning," she said, suddenly shy, the events of the previous night still a scorching, visceral memory. He handed her a mug, his fingers brushing hers, and her stomach fluttered. A soft, nervous excitement she hadn't felt since she was a reckless teenager. "The storm's over," she murmured, looking out at the sun trying to break through the clouds. "So it is," he said, his eyes focused entirely on her face. "You could stay another day," she suggested, testing the waters. "Just to be safe, the forecast mentioned possible aftershocks." A beat of charged silence, then his mouth twitched, a wicked glint in his eyes. "Aftershocks," he echoed, stepping forward. "I see, you're just being responsible for the structural integrity of the building." "I am extremely responsible," she replied, her chin lifting slightly. "Yes," he agreed, his voice rough as his fingers tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "You are, and I am deeply, deeply grateful." When he kissed her, it was slow and warm, tasting like coffee and something deeper, something unspoken and profound. Her body leaned into him before her mind caught up. "Just one more day," he murmured against her lips. But one day became two, then a week, then more. They fell into an easy, intimate rhythm, except nothing about it was easy. Every brush of skin felt electric. Every look lingered a beat too long. They joked about their arrangement, Nicky calling him her kept man, James insisting he was earning his keep in increasingly creative ways. "You saved my life," he said one afternoon, backing her against the kitchen counter, his mouth ghosting her jaw. "Let me show my appreciation. You look exhausted." "This is appreciation," she panted as his fingers teased the edge of her waistband. "Deep, smoldering gratitude," he confirmed solemnly before demonstrating just how grateful he could be. Underneath the humor was something deeper, more intense, like the way his eyes would go flat and almost threatening when another man flirted with her at the corner store, or the way he would growl low and quiet when he kissed her neck just where her pulse beat loudest. James wasn't content to simply live in her space. He approached her apartment's maintenance problems with systematic, terrifying efficiency. He didn't just fix the cabinet door. He reorganized the entire kitchen for optimal workflow, creating a system that Nicky hadn't realized she desperately needed. "You don't have to do all this," Nicky said one evening, holding a screwdriver he had handed her without explanation, standing on a chair to reach a dusty light fixture. "It's inefficient to let problems accumulate," he said, matter-of-factly, his amber eyes focused entirely on the task at hand. "Small issues become systemic failures. This apartment has too many systemic failures." Soon, James's organizational skills extended beyond her apartment. He created schedules for building maintenance, sorted out rotation charts for helping Mr. Peters get his groceries, and somehow convinced all the neighbors to agree to a new rent collection strategy that bypassed Mr. Mason. His ability to command a situation, even without authority, was unnerving. "You have a way with people," Nicky observed one evening as they climbed the stairs. "It's like you always know how to get them to do what you want." James stopped so suddenly she nearly collided with him. "Is that a bad thing?" he asked, genuinely curious, the shadow of doubt returning to his eyes. "No," she said, acutely aware of his fingers on her elbow. "It's just unusual, like you're used to being in charge of a lot of people, like you're used to everyone jumping when you speak. Later, when they were tangled in bed, he kissed down her neck with barely restrained hunger. She felt his teeth graze her skin, sharper than they should be from a man used to getting what he wants. "I shouldn't," he murmured, his voice trembling. Instead of stopping, he sank his mouth into her skin and left a faint, tender bruise shaped like his possessive hunger. One afternoon at their usual coffee shop, Nicky excused herself for the bathroom. When she returned, she found a stunning, elegantly dressed woman leaning against their table talking to James with obvious interest. The surge of possessiveness that hit Nicky was so powerful it stopped her mid-step. The woman laughed at something James said, leaning closer, and Nicky felt like she couldn't breathe. What right do I have to feel jealous? She thought. They were just roommates with benefits, a temporary arrangement. But watching the stranger flirt with him, seeing the easy charm in James's polite responses, Nicky realized with startling clarity that she didn't want to be just anything to him. She wanted to be everything. The thought hit her like a freight train. She was in love with him. She was in love with a man whose real name she didn't even know. A man who might see her as nothing more than temporary shelter and convenient, passionate sex. "You've been somewhere else since the coffee shop," James observed on the way home, his nostrils flaring slightly, as if he was reading her mood through scent. "I'm fine, James, just thinking," she lied, her voice tight. He studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. "Tell you what, let me cook tonight. You don't have to worry about Leo's dinner or yours." "You don't have to." "I want to," he said firmly, cupping her face in his hands. "Let me take care of you, Nicole." His thumb brushed across her lips, and she found herself leaning into the touch like she was drawn to him by some magnetic force. "Okay," she whispered. He smiled, a slow, sharp, full of promise smile. "Good, I'll be back in an hour with supplies." She was still standing there, smiling weakly to herself, when a harsh, familiar voice cut through her thoughts. "You should be ashamed of yourself, Nicole." Nicky spun around to see a well-dressed, middle-aged man striding toward her, his face twisted with disgust. His expensive suit and confident bearing screamed money and power, but his expression was filled with cold rage. "Excuse me," Nicky said, taken aback. "Being with that man," the man spat, his voice getting louder. "Do you conveniently ignore all the lives he's ruined because he buys you cheap groceries?" "I'm sorry, I don't know what you're talking about." "Gabriel Norman," the man spat, his voice laced with venom. "The head of the Norman family, do you not recognize him?" Nicky frowned in utter confusion. "Don't play dumb with me, I saw you with him, the most dangerous man in this city, a criminal kingpin." "Wait," Nicky shook her head. "Are you talking about James? That's not his name, he's not some head of a family. He's homeless, he has amnesia." "Amnesia?" The man laughed harshly, a grating, unpleasant sound. "The man's worth millions. He controls half the transport lines on the West Coast. He's probably working some elaborate scheme, hiding assets, avoiding a federal indictment, or running from a rival family. His kind always has an angle." Nicky remembered James's wound, the poor condition he'd been living in, and above all, the lost looks he'd get whenever he tried to remember his past life. "You're wrong," she insisted, but doubt had already begun to creep in, cold and sharp. All those contradictions about James, his refined speech, his natural authority, the way he commanded every situation like he was born to be in charge. "I have to go," she whispered, turning to hurry away. "Look, kid," the man said, his anger fatting into something like pity. "Maybe you truly didn't know, but now you do. If I were you, I'd keep away from that man. He doesn't have friends, only assets and rivals." Chapter 8. Nicky sat at a long, wooden table at the public library, surrounded by stacks of old newspapers and magazines. She had been at it for 2 hours, combing through back issues of the Seattle Times, Fortune, and Business Week. Every search for Gabriel Norman brought up the same impossible truth. There he was, on Forbes 40 Under 40, on a New York Times cover story, America's most dangerous kingpin, with a photo that made her stomach twist and turn. It was James. Gabriel Norman, in a sleek, custom-tailored suit, standing in a glass-walled office high above Manhattan. The articles were accompanied by photos of his sprawling estate in the Hamptons, his penthouse in Manhattan, and his fleet of luxury cars. Nicky stared at the images, feeling smaller and more insignificant with each one. The man in these photos belonged to a world so far removed from her cramped one-bedroom apartment that they might as well be different species. The articles described his ruthless business acumen, his aggressive acquisition strategies, and his total iron-fisted control over what was discreetly referred to as transport logistics and private security. The headquarters of the Norman family was based in Manhattan, nearly 3,000 miles from Seattle. She bought the magazine and stumbled home, clutching the glossy evidence. James was in the kitchen, wearing borrowed clothes, stirring a pot of simmering tomato sauce like he belonged there. The sight gutted her. Him, barefoot in her kitchen, playing house like it was real, like any of this was real. Nicky threw the magazine at him. It hit his chest and fell to the floor, the pages splaying open to reveal his face staring up from the glossy cover. The silence that followed was deafening. James stared down at the magazine, and Nicky saw the exact moment recognition, and then crushing, devastating panic flickered across his features. "Have you been lying to me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Is this all some kind of sick joke, some kind of elaborate hiding strategy?" "No," he protested immediately, shaking his head. "Nicky, Gabriel Norman," she read from the cover, her voice trembling. "Net worth $2.8 billion, head of the Norman family and holdings." She pointed to the page. "That's you, isn't it?" James's mouth opened and closed like he couldn't find the words. I don't remember any of that," he ended up whispering, the desperation genuine. "A man came up to me today," Nicky continued, packing the small space. "He knew you. He said you destroyed his company. He called you a kingpin." "That's not..." James looked up from the magazine, his eyes pained. "I would never look at yourself, Nicky." "Look at this," Nicky said, gesturing to the open pages. "Look at that house, that office. You could buy my entire building with pocket change. This is your world, not mine." The photographs mocked her with their opulence. She thought of her son, her own reflection in the bathroom mirror this morning, tired eyes, second-hand clothes, a life hanging on by a thread. "I don't remember being that person," he insisted, anguish in his voice. "I don't remember the ruthlessness." "It doesn't matter," Nicky said, turning away from him, because looking at his face hurt too much. She felt like she was losing him, like he was already slipping away into that glittering, dangerous world where she could never follow. "Now that you know who you are, you can go home, to your world, to your people." "Nicky, you're not going to stay here now, are you?" She flipped to the photo spread of his Hamptons estate. "Look at this. You could be living in a mansion instead of sleeping on my uncomfortable couch." "Come on," James's voice became strained. "We don't even know if that's really me, could be a look-alike." Nicky shook her head and moved past him toward the kitchen sink. "Let's have dinner then, shall we?" "Oh, wait. Why would you have my pasta when you could be dining at some Michelin-starred restaurant with your capos within the hour?" "Gabriel, that name means nothing to me," he snapped. "That man said you were lying about the amnesia," Nicky continued, forcing the words out. "That you're probably evading taxes or hiding assets." "And you believed him," James's voice cracked with genuine hurt. "Just like that, some stranger on the street." The pain in his voice made her want to take it all back, to apologize and pretend none of this ever happened. But she couldn't. The photographs were right there, proof of a life so far beyond her reach it might as well be fantasy. "No," Nicky said, her voice small and broken. "I know you didn't lie about the amnesia, James, but the truth is it doesn't matter, it's over. This," she waved between them, "can't go on anymore, not now." "And why not?" James challenged, his tone quiet, dangerous. "Because why would it?" she returned, finally allowing the tears to build. "Why would you choose this? Why would you choose me? Why would you choose Leo?" She gestured around her tiny apartment. "When you could have that." She held up the photo of his estate, the image blurring through her tears. Because you're not in there, James whispered, pointing at the pictures. You're here. You and Leo are the only things that feel real. They stared at each other across the small space, the weight of love, betrayal, and terror hanging between them. Nicky's heart cracked a little more with each passing second. Look, you should go, she said finally. Call your organization or something. They can send a jet. I don't want to go. Yeah, well, I want you to. You're in my home, Gabriel. James's eyes flashed gold, not with magic, but with intense internal fury and pain. You want me to leave? He asked, the word a rough, guttural sound. Nicky didn't reply. She couldn't trust her voice. She was afraid if she spoke, she'd take it all back, beg him to stay. Nicky! His voice was rougher now, with an edge she'd never heard before. It was a raw, pained sound. Yes, she whispered, the word tearing something vital inside her chest. I want you to leave. James looked like he might argue, his shoulders tense with suppressed power, and then he winced. His face contorted in pain, and suddenly he stumbled, one hand going to his head like an invisible vice had clamped down. What's wrong? Nicky asked, alarm cutting through her anger. He didn't reply, just made a sound that was part gasp, part animalistic moan. His breathing became labored, and cold sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool evening air. James, Gabriel, fear replaced her anger as she watched him struggle. What's wrong? He crouched down, his whole body trembling violently. His hands were clenched into fists, digging his nails into his palms. James, Nicky's voice came out as a terror-filled whisper. He made a sound that was a low, desperate scream of agony, and then his body seized up, his limbs locking. He wasn't shifting. He was suffering a massive, paralyzing physical breakdown, a seizure triggered by the emotional overload and the lingering effects of the blow that caused his amnesia. His clothes tore slightly as his muscles violently spasmed. I calm my head, he gasped, his amber eyes wide with pain and terror, staring at her with one last, heartbreaking look. Nicky screamed, the sound ripping from her throat involuntarily. Gabriel collapsed, hitting the floor with a heavy thud, his body going instantly limp. Chapter 9. Nicky stood frozen in her apartment, surrounded by the mess, staring at the still, large figure of the man who had just collapsed. He wasn't shifting. He was having a medical emergency. The silence after the chaos was deafening. First, gentle, mysterious James was actually a ruthless mafia boss named Gabriel Norman, and now he had collapsed right in front of her. I'm losing my mind, she whispered, rushing to his side. She felt for a pulse. It was weak but steady. She saw his face again right before the seizure, the confusion, the pain. He truly hadn't known what was happening. He had been terrified of himself. She had sent him away in his moment of need. The guilt hit hard, heavy as stone. Damn it, she breathed, grabbing her jacket and wrapping a shawl around the sleeping Leo. She couldn't leave him, not after the way he looked at her. She had to get him help. The streets were eerily quiet for early evening. Nicky dragged James's large, heavy body into the hallway, trying desperately to move him to the street. She was only halfway there when strong hands grabbed her from behind. What? She started to scream, but a rough, cold hand clamped over her mouth. She was yanked violently into the narrow space between two buildings. Her heart pounded as she struggled, biting the hand, kicking wildly. But there were at least two men, maybe three, and they were strong, too strong. Norman, someone said behind her. Is that her, the whore who sheltered him? Through the panic, she saw the man who had recognized James' earlier step from the shadows. Yes, the man said, eyeing her with something close to pity. That's Nicole Bells, the one who housed him. One of the men shoved a wad of cash into the man's hand. Payment as agreed. Nicky's eyes widened. She thrashed harder, tried to scream, but someone pressed a cloth over her nose and mouth. The sweet, chemical stench made her gag. Don't worry, sweetheart, the man said, his voice fatting as the drug took hold. We won't hurt you badly. We just need bait to draw out the Kingpin's guards. Chapter 10. Nicky woke to a pounding head and the bitter, metallic taste of chemicals in her mouth. She was zip-tied to a metal chair in an abandoned warehouse. The air was thick with rust and rot. Yellow street light filtered in through broken windows high above. 3 massive men circled her like predators. Big, muscular, and too still. They were dressed in cheap, dark clothing. "She's awake," one said. "Good." Another crouched to her eye level, his breath sour. "Now we wait for the Kingpin's men to show up." The leader, a stocky man with a brutal, scarred face, pulled a knife, testing its edge on his thumb. "Either way, she's done her job." Morrison said to make sure Gabriel suffers. "We'll make a video of her getting cut up, send it to his organization, and watch them burn." Terror gripped her as the blade came closer. "Please, don't worry, sweetheart. We'll make it quick after he's dealt with. This is just to send a message." Then came the sound of a car skidding, and a terrifying, authoritative voice shouting outside. "I thought you said he was out of commission," one whispered, panic in his voice. "Shut up, get ready. Get the girl by the window." The massive, familiar figure of James, now Gabriel, stepped into the light. He wasn't a wolf, but he moved like one, fast, lethal, and radiating pure, contained violence. He had cleaned the blood from his face, but his eyes were like chips of amber ice, locked on the knife near her throat. "Well, well, the great Gabriel Norman," the leader sneered, not lowering the blade. "Down to his knees for a woman and her brat." Gabriel stepped forward. The men moved, surrounding her. "You remember how this works, don't you, Gabriel?" the leader taunted. "One more step and she dies. You surrender your assets and your loyalty to the Rossi family, or the pretty single mom bleeds out." Gabriel stopped, eyes locked on the blade. "Let her go, you don't want this fight." "We already have it," the leader yelled, his voice cracking with adrenaline. He made a sharp, deliberate cut across Nicky's arm, shallow but immediately bleeding. That's when Gabriel snapped. He moved. He lunged, not at the leader, but at the man to his left. He moved with the precision and brute force of a lifetime of combat training. His fist connected with the man's jaw with a sickening crack. The element of surprise gave him the edge. Chaos erupted. Gabriel fought with silent, focused savagery. He was a professional weapon, leveraging weight, speed, and unforgiving pressure points. The men came at him in tandem, but they were amateurs next to a man who lived at the top of the criminal hierarchy. He used the crates, the shadows, and pure, concentrated rage. The fight was brutal, fast, and final. One by one, they collapsed, limping, beaten, defeated. Only the leader remained. He snarled, backing toward a broken window, and vanished into the dark night. Gabriel swayed. Blood covered his borrowed sweater. He took one step toward Nicky and collapsed. "James!" Nicky broke free from the damaged restraints and dropped to her knees. He lay still on the concrete, pale and unconscious. "James," she whispered, cradling his head, her hands pressed uselessly against the worst of the wounds. "Wake up!" His eyes fluttered open, unfocused. He looked at her, dazed. "Nicky, what happened to me? I remember the pain, then I saw you hurt." "You were having a seizure, Gabriel," she said, her voice strained. "You're sick. You have to get help." "Those men, they knew me. They said I'm bleeding too much." "I need to get you help," Nicky insisted. "Nicky," he whispered, his hand finding hers, his grip weak. "What if they're right? What if I really am a monster? I put you in this place." "No," she said fiercely. "The man I know is good. He's kind. You just risked everything to save me. My son's father would never have done that." Her voice cracked. "I love you, James. Whoever you were, whatever your name is, I love the man I found." His eyes widened slightly at her confession, but before he could respond, they rolled back and he went limp in her arms. "Help!" Nicky screamed into the empty warehouse. "Somebody, please help us." That's when she heard the sound of expensive cars pulling up outside, followed by rapid, professional footsteps. "He's here," a voice called out. 3 figures in tailored suits, one silver-haired man, one sharp blonde woman, and the younger man with wire-rimmed glasses, Justin, burst through the warehouse entrance. The silver-haired man rushed forward, dropping to his knees beside them. "Kingpin, can you hear me?" "Please help us," Nicky gasped. He's bleeding out. He needs a hospital. Hospital? The blonde woman sneered at Nicky. What for? The Kingpin has his own doctors. Justin, the one with the briefcase, said dismissively. Though, perhaps we could accelerate the process a bit. If he could make it to tonight's emergency meeting, that would save us considerable time. The board is restless about the Italian deal. These people are crazy, Nicky muttered. But then, the blonde woman produced a heavy-duty injection kit from her jacket and administered a shot directly into Gabriel's neck. No, Nicky yelped, but suddenly Gabriel gasped and sat upright, his eyes snapping open with a startling, cold clarity. The three newcomers immediately inclined their heads in perfect synchronization. Kingpin, they said in unison. Welcome back. If I could just get your signature on this loyalty agreement really quickly, Justin said, pulling out documents. For crying out loud, Nicky exploded. He's wounded, leave him alone. But Gabriel blinked, took a quick look at the document, and his entire demeanor shifted. What the hell, Justin? He snarled, ripping the papers to shreds. This agreement's garbage. What did I tell you about the Santino contract? You hold them by the throat, otherwise they'll bleed you dry. Justin blinked back what might be tears of relief. Oh, thank God you're back, Kingpin. We've been so lost without the Kingpin's directives. You're an incompetent git, Justin, Gabriel continued coldly. But sir, where have you been? What happened? None of your business, Gabriel cut him off with icy precision. It was a deliberate TBI, traumatic brain injury, inflicted by a rival faction attempting to steal my mind and my assets. And it worked, until now. The blonde woman sniffed delicately. Kingpin, now that you've dealt with those three, what should we do? Do we retaliate? Make an example? Show the other families what happens when they target us? Nicky felt like she was watching strangers. And she was, because this cold, calculating man giving orders was not the kind person she knew. What do we do about the human? The woman asked suddenly, pointing at Nicky. Gabriel's gaze snapped to her, and for just a moment, a half-second, something flickered across his face: tenderness, regret, loss. Escort her home, he said flatly. Make sure she signs the NDAs, a severance package for her trouble, and ensure her apartment window is replaced by a professional crew by dawn. No police reports. She is to be untouched. Wait, Nicky started, reaching for him, but the silver-haired man and Justin were already pulling her gently but firmly to her feet. As they led her toward a waiting black car, Nicky looked back desperately. The man she fell in love with, gentle, lost James, who worried about Mr. Peters and helped her with Leo, might as well have never existed at all. Epilogue. 2 weeks felt like 2 years. Nicky stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror, barely recognizing the woman looking back. Dark circles, limp hair, an extra few pounds she hadn't needed. The whole building had been trying to feed her since he left. Even Mr. Mason brought a casserole, hovering awkwardly in her doorway. We miss seeing you and James together, Mrs. Sarah had said gently. Such a nice young man. Quiet. Nicky swallowed the lump in her throat. How do you tell someone you're mourning, a man who might never have existed? He disappeared without a word. Just a team of lawyers at her door the next morning, armed with ironclad NDAs and confidentiality agreements. Sign here and here. Initial here. A sizable thank you for your discretion deposit appeared in her account, enough to pay off every debt, move Leo into a great daycare, and finally breathe. Useful, yes, but it made her feel cheap. Erased. Not a word from him. The one silver lining, her job. Thanks to a sudden, anonymous referral and a complete resume overhaul that looked suspiciously like James's optimal workflow strategy, she landed a position at a prestigious marketing firm. But success felt hollow when you had no one to share it with. Her days blurred into meetings and emails. And tonight, walking home from another long day of pretending to care, the sky opened up. Rain poured in relentless sheets, the same kind that brought them together. Without thinking, her feet led her somewhere else, not home, to the alley. It was smaller than she remembered, dirtier, just a narrow passage between buildings, unremarkable, except that it had changed everything. She stood in the exact spot where she found him. Rain soaked through her jacket. How could she have known that the man slumped here, lost, vulnerable, was a mafia kingpin, a corporate shark, and a figure of terror? And yet, even then, she'd felt something, a pull, like he was already important. The rain suddenly stopped hitting her, though she can still hear it pattering around her. She blinked, confused. There was an umbrella over her head. She turned slowly, afraid of what she'd find, or worse, what she wouldn't find. But he was there, holding a black umbrella over them both. His hair was shorter, expertly styled. He was clean-shaven, dressed in a charcoal suit that probably costs more than her building, but his eyes, those unusual amber eyes with flecks of gold, were exactly the same. "You're still here," he said softly, his voice achingly familiar. She shrugged, throat tight. "Yeah, well," she murmured, the rain dripping from her hair. "Just in case." Something like hope, raw and desperate, flickered across his face, but she steeled herself against it, against him. The last time she saw this man, he walked away without a backward glance, leaving her to clean up the shattered glass and the pieces of her heart. "So," she said, finding her voice, "you remember everything then, Gabriel." He hesitated. "Yes," he admitted after a beat, "I do." "Good," she gave him a small, tight smile. "Convenient, I mean, for all those business deals your associates seem to need you for. The Italian one, for example." His smile tightened into something nervous. "Yes," he said, "I suppose so." Rain drummed against the umbrella, creating a private world around them. He looked at her carefully. "How have you been, Nicole? And Leo?" "Well, I haven't been kidnapped in a while, so there's that," she replied, making him wince. "I am so deeply sorry for what happened that night," he said. "It was entirely my fault you got hurt. If I had known who was looking for me, I would have been gone sooner." "You know what hurt more than being grabbed by those men?" she interrupted, her voice shaking. "The fact that you just disappeared afterward without a word, without so much as a goodbye, and sent lawyers." Pain flashed across his face. "I'm sorry," he said again, and she believed he meant it, which somehow made it worse. "When I woke up with all my memories intact, I was concerned. Alarmed, actually. The TBI was inflicted by the family of my ex-fiancée, Chloe, and they had rival groups watching me. The moment I remembered myself, I was a target." He ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "I needed to understand what had happened before I saw you again. I couldn't risk them finding out I cared about you. I wanted to get you and Leo away from all of it. They would use you as leverage." The sincerity in his voice touched something in her, but she'd been hurt too badly to let her guard down easily. "You could have called. You own the world's secure phone network. And risk someone listening in. It sounds paranoid, I know, but it comes with being the kingpin." "Right, on top." She shook her head. "So, you got your memories back and remembered you're some big corporate criminal." "I remembered I'm a lot of things," he interrupted, his voice laced with self-loathing. "And none of them particularly clean. All those things you heard about me that night, they're true. I'm ruthless, Nicole. A violent man, it's why I was targeted." "You deserved the head injury then," she said, sighing. A surprised laugh escaped him. "I probably did," he admitted. "The TBI was designed to scramble my cognitive function, to turn the kingpin into a beggar. Chloe's family was convinced I would die alone, without anyone caring enough to save me." Nicky felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Oh, when I was lying in this alley and you found me, you said—" "I remember what you said," he interrupted, sighing. He looked dejected at her tone, his shoulders dropping slightly. "Right," he said carefully. He hesitated, then asked, "And now, do you think perhaps in time you could still love me now that I'm this?" He gestured to himself. "This," Nicky repeated. "I'm still all those terrible things I was before," he said, words coming faster now. "I still run a cutthroat organization. I still make decisions that hurt people. I'm still surrounded by others just as ruthless as I am. But the thing is, Nicole, that I now remember what I was like when I was with you. And I liked that person much more. I like being James." Nicky snorted. "So what? You want me to be your moral compass, the mafia boss's good luck charm?" "No, Nicole," his voice dropped to a desperate, rough whisper. I want you to love me still. I've missed you. I can't go back to how things were before. Not anymore. Not when I know what it feels like to be loved by someone like you. You and Leo are the only innocents I've ever touched. I mean selfless, he said, reaching up to brush rain-dampened hair from her face. And brave, kind. His thumb traces her cheekbone, and very, very beautiful. Nicky felt tears building behind her eyes, and she blinked them back furiously. Look, she said, her voice unsteady. We started this thing when you weren't yourself, but your memories are back now, and eventually you'll realize you belong in that sparkly world of yours. And I. There's nothing sparkly about it, he interrupted. Not without you. There is no world I want to return to if you and Leo are not in it. His lips found hers, warm and familiar and desperate all at once. He kissed her like a drowning man finding air, like someone coming home after a long absence. I love you, he whispered. I was supposed to die alone, but you saved me with your kindness. Now I have everything, and the only thing I want is you. Give me a chance to be the man you helped, not the man I was. She looked up at him. This man who was both James and Gabriel, both the lost soul she found in an alley and the powerful creature who stood before her now. Just one more chance, he pleaded softly. And despite everything, despite the pain of the past 2 weeks, despite the terrifying complications that loving a mafia kingpin would bring, Nicky rose on her tiptoes and pressed her lips to his again. The rain continued to fall around them, but neither noticed. In this moment, in this unremarkable alley where their story began, they are the only 2 people in the world. The single mother who saved a kingpin, and the kingpin who finally found his heart. The story ends here, but my work doesn't. If you felt that ending, you know what to do. This massive script took days of work and heart. A single subscription is all I ask to keep this channel alive. Don't be the person who takes the story and runs.